You were listening to From Sobriety to Recovery with Jesse Mogul, episode 175. Let's get to the show. Welcome back to From Sobriety to Recovery. I am your host, Jesse Mogul. I am in addiction recovery. I am thrilled to have you here. Episode 175. It just rolls off the tongue. We will hit 200 before the end of the year, which is pretty cool. Figuring 25 more episodes. Absolutely. I have 25 more weeks in this year, I believe. Anyways, we'll do math later. Today, what we're going to talk about is a continuation of what it's going to be like for you when you first step into major life-altering shit. Whether you're quitting booze, drugs, sugar, death metal, I don't know, whatever it is. Because I want to make sure that the frame we're using around this is that, at least for me, the way I see things, you can Google, other people have their own opinions, this is mine, that addiction is just a very, very, very deep groove of habits that have seeped into every facet of your life. It is habits to the nth degree. Every habit that you have in your life, and your life is 99% habit. Even I would go as far to say that it's 100% habit, but I don't think that a universal qualifier works here. Certainly 99% is easy to call out, because even if there's something brand new that you're going to start doing today, let's say juggling, the way that you first pick up the tennis balls, the way that you first choose to learn how to juggle, whether it be going to YouTube or talking to somebody else who's juggled, the way that you're going to talk to yourself as you're learning the new skill of juggling, those things are habits. Those are ways that you have done things in the past and you're continuing on that ride. So even when you go off and do something brand new, it's still the way that you learn it, the reasons why you want to juggle, what you think juggling is going to do, the way that you learn how to do it, the questions you have about it. These are all going to be part of your learning process. We've talked about that in the past under ways that we learn. And therefore, it's also habit. So everything's really a habit. Knowing that, we can begin to utilize all of the strategies that we have put in place in our lives already in order to embrace and go about adding more positive, desirable habits into our lives. So what we talked about last week was how noticing your environment and your physical body and being very aware of those, being very self-aware of what you're doing with your physical body and how it is interacting in your environment. Whether it be moving around your furniture in your house, maybe you live with people who do not want to be a participant in that, so maybe you find something that you can shift in your environment. Perhaps it's the seat that you always sat in that you used to drink in and do drugs in all the time, and so now you sit in a different place in the living room. Whatever it can be. I'm not going to sit here and throw out infinite examples. I just ask you to be extremely aware of when I say shift things in your environment, if you start to immediately come up with ways that you can do that or excuses for why you can't. Because that's a habit. Do you see solutions or do you see problems? That's a habit. It's up to you now to begin to shift the way that you think about things. One of the reasons why I chose neuro-linguistic programming to be the foundation for how I coach and for the way I've healed myself is because it allows for opportunities to go inside the unconscious mind and unearth the first time that we ever chose seeing problems rather than solutions. The first time we ever chose to beat ourselves up rather than lift ourselves up. You're able to very much go back to particular moments in your life and see them differently, experience them differently. Because if how you're experiencing them now is no longer serving your highest sense of self, is no longer leading you to your meant to be, is in fact holding you into your addiction, going back and seeing it through a different lens is absolutely beneficial. Everybody that you've ever interacted with has their own trauma, their own suffering that they are trying to work out within inside themselves or unaware of working out inside themselves. So they're going about their lives and they're behaving and acting toward you, around you, with you, under their own programmed response system. And if that meant beating you as a child and calling you a piece of shit and talking down to you and making your life miserable, I am sorry that happened to you, I also would invite you to step into a space where you can step outside of yourself and see it from an observer perspective, or what was the trauma and pain they were going through that led them to thinking that treating you that way was something that they needed to do in order to serve one of their 6 human needs. Because no one's doing anything against you, they're doing it for themselves. You may have been the conduit for them to have achieved doing something for themselves. But if it wasn't you, it would have been somebody else. More than likely, it was a lot of people. You were just one of them. So now you're older, you're wiser, you're seeking to no longer live in that feedback loop from the past. And because you want to release that, because that trauma, that pain, that suffering has been keeping you in this state of addiction, has been keeping you in this state of living this constant loopy life. I would much rather be in a positive feedback loopy life than a negative feedback loopy life. And part of that is going to be going back, healing, making amends, forgiving those who have done you wrong, understanding that you can't go back into the past and change any of the abuse or trauma, but you can certainly reframe the way that you are going to experience it moving forward. So when we talk about shifting your environment, when we talk about shifting your physical body, these are the beginning aspects of making these changes. If you say, I don't want to forgive my father for beating me, I don't want to forgive my perpetrator for sexually assaulting me, that's on you. That's fine. I will never tell you how to handle and deal with your trauma. You can Google this on your own and discover most other people will mirror what I'm saying, that there has to be some level of forgiveness and release, or you will be living in this trauma cycle for the rest of your life. It's not benefiting you. And regardless of whether that person deserves your forgiveness or not, right? You drinking the poison hoping to kill them isn't working, hasn't been working. You've been drinking the poison. Your alcohol, your drugs, your sugar, whatever your addiction is, you have been drinking that poison. Are those people in pain? Probably not. Are you? Probably so. So when I say let's shift our physical bodies and let's find, and again, furniture in your environment, people in your environment, your apartment, your job, there's a lot of things. I mean, this, again, anything outside of you is your environment. Hell, you even have an environment inside your head talking to yourself about what's happening externally. So environment covers a humongous, infinite parameter of different variables around you. So you have this option now to start seeing your environment as something that's malleable, something that you can bend to your positivity, towards the creation of this new self for yourself. Because again, if you hang your hat on somebody else patting you on the back and lifting you up and applauding you for getting sober, if that person ever doesn't applaud you, perhaps potentially trigger moment. You applaud you. You celebrate you. If no one else wants to be there when you put a candle on a cupcake on your 17-month anniversary of being sober, that's so be it. But you're there. And yes, man, life is going to be shitty, y'all. Right? Bills going to come when you're not expecting them. Money isn't going to be as flush as you'd like. And, car's going to break down. Tire's going to go flat. Someone's not going to show up to a meeting and you really wanted them to because you were going to pitch them a great idea. And now you don't have that opportunity. And I mean, there's so many different ways that life can seemingly disappoint. When you step into a, how is this actually working for me rather than against me mindset, then you will be able to understand that life is working for you, through you, and not necessarily to you. It's your choice. So when you're shifting your physical body, getting up out of your chair, moving around more often, right? Taking 10,000 steps a day might be something that you've gone and Googled 1,000 times, and there's all this different data about whether you'll really lose weight or whatever. I'm not even talking about it as a weight loss mechanism. As a weight releasing mechanism. Sorry, you know how I feel about the word loss. When you lose things, you want to find them. Do you really want to find weight once you've released it? Not so much. I'm not even talking about steps being a weight releasing mechanism. I'm talking about it being a physical way to get your body going. Put on some music, put on a podcast, put me on, put on something. And even if you end up daydreaming through 30 minutes of an audiobook thinking about the wonderful life you're going to create for yourself, you can always go back and re-listen to it. But those thoughts you're having is you conjuring up your future. If those daydreams turn into nightmares and end up being you cycling back and beating the shit out of yourself, that's what we're going to talk about today. Because we want you getting your physical body active. We want you having your environment shifting. Now what we're going to talk about is how we stay in these past loops. Why do we stay in these past loops? Why do you think you find yourself trapped in the past so often? Now, I'm going to take some of this information from the book I've been listening to lately. It's called One More Thing. It's a fantastic book. Ironically enough, I finished the one thing, and then one of my friends turned me on to The Power of One More Thing, or Power of One More, right? So they're not written by the same people, and I just went to go check out the authors. But the one thing is written by somebody completely different than The Power of One More. I keep saying one more thing, but again, apologies. I get excited. So Ed Mylett wrote The Power of One More. Somebody else completely different wrote The One Thing. You can go look up both of those books on Audible. I've been quoting a lot from them lately, or at least paraphrasing from them. In The One More, The Power of One More by Ed Mylett, he talks about why we get into these past loops. And then we're going to lateral move this over to goals and standards, and that's how we're going to finish the show. But one of the cool parts about this, and I swear, it's like this guy could have listened to my podcast and then wrote a book about the material I cover in my podcast. Each and every single section and chapter is a topic I have brought up in this show. And it's one thing to go back and read over a bunch of books that have existed for years and then bring them into the show. It's another thing to literally be talking about topics and have a book just come out that sounds like a summary of my show. It lets me know I'm on the right path, and certainly that I should be able to find a book deal. One of the things he brings up that I've also talked about is that when you are living in the past, it's because you're stuck in this thought pattern, right? There's this feedback loop that you've created in your mind. Now, one of the reasons why the mind gets stuck into these feedback loops about the past is because the past is certain. You know exactly what happened according to your ability to, remember it, as well as your mind is going to delete, distort, generalize, and then filter everything out. So we already know that you're going to get a very skewed version of your past just based on your own filtering mechanisms and your own memory patterns. So you're going to remember what you want to remember, and your reticular activating system, your RAS, is going to kick out the things that do not confirm your biases and are not part of your cognitive distortions. So it's just fascinating, the psychology around all of this. It really is. It really, really is. And this is one of the reasons I'm really latching onto and discussing how habits are really just part of the psychological buildup of our brains, and this is how addictions have been created. So you've got this cognitive dissonance, you've got this confirmation bias, all building up around the reticular activating system, or RAS, right? And so when your mind gets yourself stuck in these old loops of thinking, these old ways of thought, it's because they're familiar, right? There's an uncertainty to the future. It's just so unknown. So whenever you're thinking about the future, in your head, you're just daydreaming about the way you'd want things, or the way you hope things don't go. But the past is the past, and it's done. So you have your memory of it. So there's no uncertainty there. There can be uncertainty of, well, what if I'd have done this or that or the other? But you already know the outcome, and you already know, after enough time has passed, that this is just the way that it is. You did this, and this is what happened. Whereas the future, it's all uncertain. You haven't done anything yet, so you could still do anything, and any outcome is possible. But with the past, the outcome's already been decided. You already did all that. So your mind locks you into living in the past and thinking about this stuff because it's certain, and it's looking for certainty. Your mind's always thinking about certainty. So it's going to replay these past loops continuously in your brain because that's what it's certain of. Now, what's going on is that most of this is happening unconsciously. Because you listen to this show, you are more self-aware than most, because you are more aware of noticing these pattern loops, right? Did you see a commercial on TV of a mother or father hugging their child, and then immediately you started to feel sad because your brain pictured an image of you and your parents, and they were never hugging you, and next thing you know, you're sad. But you're aware that the commercial triggered that because you've been listening to this show so much. You know that images externally can create images internally that can absolutely shift your emotional state. So when we want to break out of these old patterns of contentment, these old patterns of thought, of looping these old memories, and again, this is all part of the brain's mechanism of fight or flight. It's one of the primary functions of our brain is to look for threats. That's that fight, flight, freeze, or fuck response, right? We've talked about the 4 Fs. I know most people don't talk about sex as being one of them, but go back and notice whenever you've had an extreme emotional high, if it has not followed some sort of period where perhaps you were a little bit more promiscuous, maybe you got a little bit more handsy with your body. There's generally, because that is an animal sensation that comes up through our core. Right, you think about whenever you have all this adrenaline and something insane just happened in your life, right? Your body's looking for ways to get rid of the adrenaline. It's in the reptilian mode, which means you're very much run by emotions, and carnal emotions are hardwired into our DNA. Right, so then you've got fight, flight, freeze, or sex, and you can absolutely see how these are the 4 Fs. So because we as humans are hardwired to be looking for perceived threats, which thus makes us hardwired to be people looking for solutions to solve, problems to solve, solutions to be had. What we're doing when we get stuck in these past loops is we're trying to come up with solutions for things that have already happened. So perhaps in the future, if they happen again, we won't make the same decision, which led us to the current way of thinking, right? It's like basically, well, last time my husband or wife said something to me, I screamed at them. So then you'll keep repeating that in your brain, hoping that next time they say something to you, you don't scream at them, but instead you respond emotionally grounded rather than reacting emotionally triggered. So we'll continuously repeat these things that have happened to us in our lives, hoping that we can take a lesson from them so we don't repeat the behavior in the future. This is part of what NLP does. It goes back into the past to look for the lesson and leave the trauma and the pain in the past where it belongs, with the memory. What ends up happening is when people come forward, there's a way of locking this in so that you can damn near guarantee that the next time this arrives, your brain will be hardwired to pull what the lesson was from your unconscious into your conscious mind and do this in milliseconds so that you can actually respond rather than react. When we go back and we replay these past memories and we come up with all these different scenarios, what ends up happening is we confuse our conscious and unconscious mind, so it doesn't know which one of the scenarios we would like to have picked. We're not even really sure if that would have played out much better. So we come back with all these made-up daydreams in our head about what we would do next time with a position that we were in from the past. And then whenever that situation or something similar arises again, the mind goes back to what it's already done before because the ideas we had anew were too convoluted. They were too confusing. Your mind is looking for simple. Simple, 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 simple. So when you first get sober, you first step into this new major habit shift in your life, you want to look for simple. If you tell yourself, well, I'm going to walk 10,000 steps today, I'm going to do 500 jumping jacks, I'm going to eat super healthy, and I'm going to journal for 45 minutes, and I'm going to meditate for an hour, and I'm going to do a handstand for 27 seconds, and I'm going to talk to the deer in the backyard, I'm going to mow the lawn, and if I do all these things, I'll be able to stay sober today. Wow. So not simple. This is why I started off with day 1, week 1, month 1 with this idea of at the beginning, focus on the environment, focus on your physical body. If your physical body is in an environment that is not conducive to keeping you sober for the next minute or hour or day, then get the hell out of the environment. But Josie, it's my house, it's where I live, and it's the people in the house that suck. Then go hide in the bedroom. Go sit in the garage. Go stay on the stairwell. Stop making excuses for why you can't and start finding ways that you can. I can't be there to make you do this. I can't hold your hand. See the solutions, not the problem. Focusing so much on the problem is what got you here to begin with. Shift your focus to solutions, and your mind will begin to show you solutions. That's what the reticular activating system does, the RAS. You make a decision and it starts showing you ways for that decision to play out in your life. If you make the decision to be pissed off at people all day, it will absolutely show you ways to be pissed off at people all day. If you make the decision to be happy with people, or at least content, or at the very least not scream at them, it will show you ways to not scream at people all day. You make the decision, your mind will show you the way. Will it happen every single time? Will it happen immediately? Will you be self-aware enough to see it? I don't know these things. I do know that that shifting and changing habits is a process. So be prepared for it not to always be so obvious, but it's there. Ask your unconscious mind, what am I not aware of right now that I can now be aware of moving forward? Be direct. Ask your unconscious mind very direct questions. Ask it very direct statements. Give it very direct commands. Unconscious mind, show me ways today that I can be more kind to myself when put in situations that I deemed stressful and used to trigger me to drinking. I mean, it can be that specific. Go back and listen to that again. Unconscious mind, I ask of you. Unconscious mind, I command you to. Unconscious mind, I seek for you to show me ways for me to be more happy in my sobriety today. Very direct commands. Because when you get yourself locked down these feedback loops from the past, it's just going to continue to repeat. Remember that self-sabotage is what you do whenever you're not aware. Once you're aware, it's not self-sabotage anymore. It's a shitty choice. Oh, well, I just self-sabotage myself by drinking every time I get stressed. Not self-sabotage, shitty choice. In that pre-contemplation phase, whenever you drank every time you got stressed out, okay, that could be self-sabotage because you're not even aware that what you're doing is happening. But once you're aware, you don't get off anymore. It's like Pavlov's dogs. Once you rung the bell, once we discovered that humans and animals and everybody else is basically just a bunch of habits built in creating a life, you don't get to unring that bell. Sorry, can't go back 174 episodes and then just decide you didn't ever hear any of this stuff. You're aware now. It's just your choice of whether you're going to accept the standards that you have been accepting all these years, or you're ready to rewrite your standards. And that's a great segue to the next end of this episode. So we understand that you're living in the past because it's what you're familiar with. You're familiar with the past, even if it's traumatic, even if it's painful, you're familiar with it. So you're going to keep looping back to it, hoping in some weird way that you're going to learn what you need to learn and then be able to respond differently in the future. Through NLP, I know many different ways why this beating of yourself up and going back the way that you have been has not been working. With the NLP that I do with myself and my clients, I didn't figure this out. Somebody else did. I learned it. But now we understand why. It's because the way you're going back and remembering it is associated through your own eyes. You're setting yourself up for so many different variables to come into play because you're just not aware of how you're building that memory in your head. Once you're aware of how you've been building that memory in your head, you can actually begin to take it apart and rebuild it in a more positive manner so that it actually benefits you rather than harms you. So this is why we go back into the past, because it's what we're certain of, and we've been looping, and now that looping is a pattern in a habit in and of itself. So as you begin to shift to this new version of yourself, you're going to very much want to be mindful of the goals that you're setting. What are the goals that are important to you? I want to be sober for a year. Great. Not very vague, not very specific. I mean, yes, being sober for a year is specific in that you've given it a time frame and you've told me the activity that you would like to still be doing after a year. The specificity, the specifics is what's going to lead you there. So your goal is to be sober for a year. What are the specific goals you're going to have each and every day, perhaps even every hour, to ensure that that outcome comes to fruition, bears fruit, happens? That's what these goals are. Now, a lot of people, and again, this is something that the guy in Ed Millett talked about in the One More Thing, the power of one more. I'm going to keep calling it the one more thing. Is that people will confuse goals and standards. And so I'm going to paraphrase this because once he said it to me, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's what I've been talking about for 3.5 years with this show, is that a goal is the outcome that you desire. I want to finish, I want to run a marathon. Right? Let's not even bring in other examples. I want to be sober for a year. That's the goal. Now, the goal is what you're seeking. Each and every day you could have a goal of, I will not drink today. Okay, good. You will not drink today. That's good. We know what you're not going to do. What are you going to do instead? I will go to the gym. I will eat healthy. I will have a loving conversation with someone who cares about me. Great. Those are 3 goals that you're going to have for today. Now, your standards are the actions you take to achieve those goals. Goals are ideas. Goals are energy. Goal is a roadmap. It's a strategy-ish. It's a plan, right? My plan for today is to go to the gym, eat healthy, whatever healthy, we'll just leave it as vague, but that's not how I would paint it. I would say I'm going to eat chicken. I'm going to eat 150 grams of protein. I'm going to eat 200 grams of carbohydrates, and I'm going to eat 75 grams of fat. That's how I would break up eating healthy for the day, right? And I'm going to keep my sugar below 30 grams. That's whenever I would lay this out, that's how I would say it to myself. That's 1,750 calories for the day. That's the current nutrition strategy I'm utilizing in order to release 7 pounds before winter. So that's what I would say to myself, very specific. Then I would put all the food in the app, and I would know that I'm achieving that goal because of the standards I set for myself. I'm going to achieve this by doing this. Standards are the action. Right, it's the performance benchmarks, and that is a term from his book, performance benchmarks, for what you're willing to tolerate. What are you going to do today in order to achieve being sober today, eating healthy, and having a loving conversation? What are the standards you want to have? Now, some of these can be super cool buzzwords, right? Like the standard I'm going to have is disciplined or hardworking or focused. Right? They can be those buzzwords because, hardworking might be going to the gym. I'm going to be focused and disciplined, and I'm going to go to the gym. Awesome. I'm going to be focused and present with my loved one when I have a heart-to-heart conversation with them. Awesome. I'm going to be focused and disciplined when I'm in the kitchen making my healthy food. Great. But standards become the actions. So what are your standards? What are you willing to tolerate? You know what your standards have been in the past because that's what led you here. Your standards were, basically walking through life as a drunk moron or high all the time, right? Showing up to work whenever you showed up, or maybe you were so diligent about showing up to work because you didn't want anyone to know you were high. So your standard was showing up on time and being a hard worker because heaven forbid you should miss a paycheck because then you wouldn't be able to get high. Or you were one of those people who jumped from job to job to job because you always knew you could get another one and you didn't really care as long as you were high. You've set your standards. Your standards are sort of those values that you have around yourself, about what it is that you seek to achieve in your life. You can think about all of the athletes that you might like, the musicians, they have standards, right? There's a standard, John Mayer is going to play his guitar as well as can be expected because that's a standard he's put out there. He's not going to go out on stage and half-ass it. Michael Jordan didn't take the basketball court and half-ass it, right? Oprah Winfrey didn't get on camera and half-ass it, right? These are standards that people have. So what are the standards that are going to lead you to achieving your goal? And you can set those as very direct statements to yourself. In order to not drink today, I am going to go to the gym for 1.5 hours. I'm going to work out my biceps, triceps, and chest, doing 3 exercises each, doing 10 reps and resting for 2 minutes per. Right? You could write that down. That's your standard. Now that's your standard. You're going to go to the gym for 1.5 hours. You're going to work out these 3 muscle groups, and this is how many times you're going to do it, and this is how many sets, and this is how much rest time. That's your standard. That becomes your bar. You go to the gym and you do that, you've achieved your bar. You want to do one more thing to push it up a notch, a little extra credit, you can do that too. You can go above your own standards, but setting standards gives you a benchmark to achieve toward. You say, well, I'm going to go to the gym. Well, what does that mean? You're just going to go to the gym and walk around in circles, which is good because you'll get your steps. But if the goal was to lift weights and put on, some muscle or feel muscle burn, walking around in a circle is not going to achieve that. If your standard for making sure you eat healthy today is just figuring out whatever you're going to eat based on what you feel like at 6 p.m., you could find yourself at McDonald's. But if you say, today my standard is to eat a very healthy meal with chicken and some steamed vegetables and a very healthy carbohydrate, then you start to think about it. Then you plan and say, oh, cool, here's a chicken breast, here's some broccoli, here's some cauliflower, here's a sweet potato. Great. This is definitely a healthy meal. Now that's your standard. For today, your standard for eating a healthy meal is chicken, broccoli, cauliflower, and sweet potato. But you set the standard, and then that's what you're now able to achieve toward. It's like the plan. right? The goal is the idea. It is the outcome you desired. The standards become the strategy and the plan for which you're going to achieve those things. If you think that you can just wing it and figure out your food whenever you're hungry, or figure out how you're going to stay sober based on your mood is like a kite in the air. It's like that plastic bag in the movie American Beauty, right? One little gust of wind can send it a completely different direction. This is why I come up with my plan the night before or first thing in the morning, and then I stick with the plan as much as I possibly can. But having the plan lets me know what I'm working off of. Lets me know what my standards were for today based on the decisions I made previously. Now, if a client calls, if a addiction recovery center calls, and they want to all of a sudden, jump into my schedule, then yes, maybe shooting a podcast or writing or researching gets shifted to another window. But at least I knew that from 2 to 3 I was supposed to be researching. If something else pops in there, that's fine. I can shift the researching to another day. But I have my standard. I know what I'm expecting of myself. If I need to be fluid and flexible, I can bring that in. But having no plan is a very, very, very shitty plan. Creating goals without also creating standards, and this is directly out of his book, creating goals without creating corresponding standards is a waste of time. Standards are immensely important. You have to have standards for what you expect from yourself. Day 1, 7, 14, 28, the standard can literally be just be sober today. Great. Again, vague. So what is that you're going to do in order to achieve sobriety? Your standard could be working out for an hour, having 2 hours worth of phone calls, calling up your sponsor, going to 2 meetings, whatever it is, that's your standard. When you achieve your standards, you move another step closer to achieving your goal. Knowing that the likelihood that the goal will achieve exactly the way you daydreamed it on day 1 at day 365, we're not looking for perfection of the achievement of the idealized goal at day 1, because you are just creating it out of thin air or what you saw other people achieve. But as you move along your way, each day hitting the goal of being sober, each day reaching your standards, your idea of what it is for you to be sober, for the life you're seeking to achieve for yourself, it's going to shift and change. Day 1, I did not realize that I wanted to be an author and a podcaster and a speaker on addiction recovery. Day 1, I just wanted to hold water in. Month 3, I learned about NLP, thought, well, this is pretty cool. I should dive into this a little bit more to help myself heal. Month 9, got a new therapist, actually went and learned a week worth of NLP, 60 hours of training in 6 days. And walked out of that like, yep, this is it. This is what I want to do. Now, how am I going to do it? I had to start setting standards to achieve the goal of best-selling author, of top 10 rated podcast, of all of these things that I've achieved. Standard was putting out a podcast every week. Standard was writing at least, 3,000 words a week for the books, or just writing 3,000 words a week just to get this information out of my head. Then let's take that information and let's introduce it to the podcast listeners. And slowly but surely, the form of the plan really started to take shape. Then the goals became bigger and bigger, because once I achieved one goal, it was like, okay, well, what can I achieve now? Great. Best-selling author. Awesome. Happened during the pandemic. Even crazier. Top 10 podcast. Shame that it happened during the pandemic, because I know a lot of people fell deep into addiction, and that's how come they went and found me. But still, it was achieved. Because I set goals, and then I set standards for myself each and every day to meet or exceed in order for me to move another step closer to the goal, knowing full well that as time progressed, the goal could shift, the goal could change. But it wasn't because I was unaware of the goal shifting and changing. I would be able to reevaluate the goal a week or a month after setting it to make sure that it was still the correct North Star for me. Is this still where I feel energetically driven to go? Is this still my toward energy? You can do all of this stuff for yourself, but we're talking about a complete remodel of your life. And if you think, but Jesse, all I do is eat some sugar, all I do is watch 6 hours of TV, all I do is stare at my phone and watch 6 hours of TikTok every day, I don't need to completely reevaluate my life. I just need to stop eating 500 grams of sugar or watching 6 hours of TikTok or 12 hours of Netflix. That's all I got to do. But the thing is you've built so many habits around eating 500 grams of sugar or watching 6 hours of TikTok or Netflix. So many of your habits are built up around that activity that when you start to remove time away from said activity that you've become addicted to, that has become habituated for yourself, all of a sudden a vacuum appears. A power vacuum appears because you've taken 3 hours away from TikTok. Well, now you've got 3 free hours. So what are you going to do with it? It boggles my mind how many people I meet in addiction recovery who are like, well, I don't have the time to go to meetings. I don't have the time to get coaching. I don't have the time to get a better job. I don't have the time to go to the gym. And then I'll ask the simplest of questions. How many hours a day did you spend in active addiction back in the day? And some people might be like, oh, I was a binge drinker on the weekend, so it really wasn't all that bad. Some people might be like 3 hours a day, every day, all the time. But even those people who only did it on the weekend were still putting a certain amount of their energy, their cognitive thinking energy, into what they were going to do over the weekend. So you could easily buy back 5 or 10 hours, even if you were just a weekend drinker throughout your normal week. If you were partying 3 hours a day, every day, all the time, you just bought yourself 3 hours. So to sit here and tell me you don't have time to up-level your life, to find a new job, to take on a new skill, to get that job, to get your finances in order, to go to the gym, just to me shows a lack of awareness of the time you have. Because you had no problem spending those 3 hours getting wasted. But now that you're not getting wasted anymore, you think, well, at least I'm not getting wasted, but I'm going to sit here and watch Netflix all day. You do as you do. If that's what you want to do, I'm not going to tell you not to. But if you're sitting there watching Netflix, upset with the way that your life is going, pissed off that that's what you're doing, and you'd rather be doing something else, then it's your responsibility to turn off the TV, get up on your feet, do something with your physical body, and shift your environment in order to achieve the goals that you have set for yourself. You must reevaluate your standards on a daily basis and ask yourself, with all honesty, is what you're doing every single day leading you toward the version of yourself that you want to be? If you have doubts that you deserve that version of yourself, if you have thoughts inside your head that you're a worthless piece of shit who doesn't deserve anything good and deserves exactly what they have in their life, then absolutely call me. Call me and let's get you into some coaching. At the very least, get yourself a mentor, sponsor. Get somebody in your life who will tell you that that kind of thinking, that's stinking thinking. That's what got you here. It's not what's going to get you out. As Einstein once famously said, or at least I'll paraphrase it and give him credit for it, you cannot resolve a problem with the same kind of thinking that got you there to begin with. Feedback looping into your past, hoping that somehow you're going to be able to miraculously make the past different, isn't the way to look at the past. You go back to the past for the lesson. You leave the trauma and the sadness back there with the memory where it belongs, and you bring the lesson up here with us right now in the present to utilize it as a strength, as a motivational force to move you forward. And you move forward knowing that when you set goals, standards of behavior have to come with it. I will be sober for a year. Great. How are you going to do that? What's something you're going to do each and every day, each and every week, each and every month to ensure that you start to check those days off and not just white knuckling it, but actually healing yourself? Those are the standards that you set. I'm going to journal for an hour. I'm going to meditate for an hour. I'm going to go to the gym for an hour. Those are your standards. When you say you're going to do those things, those are your standards. Stand up for them. Because you can either have excuses or accomplishments, but you can't have both. Excuses, accomplishments, but you can't have both. Keep telling me why you can't. Congratulations. What I hear you doing is fighting for the life you currently have that you've already told me you don't want. Keep fighting for the life that you have that doesn't make you happy. And you'll keep having the life that you have that doesn't make you happy. I don't mean to sound like a dick when it comes to this stuff, but there's a level of personal responsibility you have to be willing to step into. I'm not your dad, I'm not your grandpa, I'm not whatever authoritarian figure told you that you were worthless back in the day. I am not that dude. I think everybody has an amazing worth. I think everybody has an equal voice. Everybody deserves to stand on their own pedestal. We should all get up on top of pedestals, and then we could all look at each other from the same pedestals. Or nobody's on pedestals because nobody deserves to be on a pedestal. Not me, not a president, not a musician, not a billionaire, nobody. Nobody is on a pedestal. We're all eye to eye here. Some people have accomplished different things, which gives the allure of prestige and of them being special. But all they did was take this stuff that I talk about and teach and then begin to work it every single day. You can do this too. The power has been within you all the time. You're like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. You've been wearing the red ruby slippers all along. Tap your heels. Let's go home. Let's go back to the person you know you can be. And if you don't know you can be that person, keep listening. Keep reading, keep acting. But no matter how much you listen to me, no matter how much you read other people's books, no matter how much you go off and listen to the Audible books that I bring up to you guys, if you don't apply it and then evaluate your outcome and then reapply and reevaluate till you get to your desired outcome, and it might require thousands of loops in order to achieve this. But that's awesome because you've already been doing thousands of loops in a more negative, undesirable way that's led you here. So why not do thousands and thousands and thousands of more positive actions for yourself, and then you'll achieve infinitely better life than you currently have doing the same bullshit you've always been doing. You live in the past because it's easy to manipulate your memories. If you're going to begin to do that, then know how to do it in order for it to benefit you. When you set goals, understand that the standards are the actions you're going to take to achieve the goals. Sit down right now, ask yourself, what is a goal? And then write down, what are you going to do in order to achieve that? If you don't know what to do in order to achieve releasing 20 pounds, then Google how to lose 20 pounds. Google best ways to healthily let go of 20 pounds, right? There's a ton of information out there. Read 10, 15, 20 blogs. See what all these people say. Take an assortment of the ones that seem to vibe with you and then make those your standards, and then each and every day do those. Reach or exceed your standards every single day. Then you'll reevaluate that goal in about 2-3 months and realize 20 pounds was nothing. You're ready to do 40 pounds. Or you're ready to never touch booze again. Or you're ready to finally call up that person that you hated and make amends to them because you realized that you were both always drunk and you weren't even talking to the real them, let alone them talking to the real you. You live in the past because it's easy to loop over things that we're certain of. It's not so easy to create and imagine a future. It's within that imagination that you set goals, and the standards become the actions you take to achieve the goals. Let's start doing this right now. Right now, sit down. What are your goals? Now, what standards are you going to set for yourself in order to achieve these goals? If you don't know what to do, start researching. Hit me up on social media. Ask me some questions. We are human beings at the apex of the information age. There is not a lack of information. If anything, there's too much. Need some help figuring it out? Hit me up on the socials. Everything that you need to contact me is in the show notes. As always, my friends, inclusivity over exclusivity, the power of positive energy, release and flow. Every day really is and will be the best day of your life because you wake up sober. My worst day sober is better than my best day drunk. Shout out to Sunshine. Glow on. See you next week. Bye-bye.